All right. Hello. Today we're going to talk about concentration, brain plasticity, and distraction. So, and one of the topics that we're going to cover is multitasking, which is really an interesting thing. Uh, so here we go. And some of this involves my backstory. So, as some of you might be aware, in 2010, I was in a car accident that left me with a pretty major brain injury. And, you know, the farther away I get from it, then the more I realize how bad it was. So, what ended up happening was that the car behind me was hit by another car behind them. And so I heard that. So I heard, so I looked in my rear view mirror to see what was happening just as that car hit me, and my head went like that, which is far worse than this or that, because your brain, there are these inside your skull, there's those little phalanges that kind of hold your brain in place to some degree. And if you go like this, then you're going to have a lot less surface area contact than if you go like that. So it did a number on my neck because the whiplash was different because it was at an angle. And so I had this 6-month recovery. I mean, it was easily 6 months. I was having brain fog and migraines and a lack of emotional control and sensitivity to light, and found it very difficult to concentrate for any certain amount of time. So I spent a lot of time at home and lost a lot of clients during that time. It was pretty difficult. And so what I started to do was to read, and that was challenging, but I knew that I had to do something because I had to kind of rebuild from where I was at. I was pretty much at ground zero. So it was in the midst of reading that I became acquainted with one of the top life coaches in the world, and he's a guy, Steve Chandler, that I talk about periodically through his books, and I've read maybe 10 of his books now. And one of the important things that he had to say was that we need to slow down in life. And it's the speed of that which life comes at us that sometimes makes us think that we need to speed up to meet it. But really, when we slow down and we take things a little bit easier, then we find that it's going to be easier to get through things, and it also enhances concentration. So one of the phrases that I picked up in one of these books was, how much better would we do in life if we told ourselves 20 times a day to slow down? All right. So slowing down also helps us concentrate better. And yet, most of the messages that we're getting from society is to speed up, drink your coffee, have your meth. If you're a Breaking Bad fan, then the message there is do meth. So we get all these messages about going faster and getting more and doing, accomplishing, more and more and more, and doing it at an ever increasing rate. And actually the opposite is true. So one thing that I think is also fascinating is that among the people who will watch these videos, I get people who also say, "Hey, Bill, you should do an audio book because I'll listen to an audio book." And I'm like, okay, because you'll listen. And I'm thinking, and I was thinking about this morning. I mean, I'm going to do audiobooks because there's money to be made there. But what do people do when they're having an audiobook? They're driving, they're doing something else, they're multitasking, they're listening, supposedly they're listening while they're also engaged in some other task, which compromises their ability to concentrate. So one of the most important things that habits that you can establish that will help it boost your concentration is that of reading. And there are numerous reasons. I mean, one is because it's a multi-sensory experience, right? So not only, so you're holding a book and your eyes are taking in the little fonts, which is a hand-eye coordination thing, actually. And then as you read, you sort of create this internal dialogue on your own. And then your imagination also fires and you begin to picture things. You make pictures in your mind of those things. And you can even read aloud to yourself. I mean, and sometimes if there's a particularly complicated, convoluted writing that you're reading, then reading it out loud can be the key to understanding that, because not only are you reading it, but you're also listening to yourself talk. So I'm gonna get, I'm just gonna solve that little thing right there. Okay, my little pop thing went away from there. Let's do that. How am I gonna get that? Oh, that solved it. Ring light. All right, fun with ring lights. Oh, ooh, maybe a little higher, maybe a little different color. No. Ooh, no. Having fun? Everybody having fun? I am. Yeah, I got to get that little thing solved. Anyway, so back to concentration. And see, look what happened. I got distracted. And I hope that little thing right there is not distracting you. And I hope that my notifications that are going off are not distracting you. But now, so, you know, our social media thing, you know, where you scroll and you look at one thing and you read some comments, and you scroll down, you look at the next one, and you read some comments. And then you're on Instagram and you're like, bloop, bloop, bloop. And you watch these little TikTok videos that are under a minute, and you're like, on to the next one, on to the next one, on to the next one. So that's distraction. And Dr. Cheryl McLaughlin, who's one of the early researchers in sports psychology before it even had a name. So there were people that were starting to do psychological research in sports with athletes, and they were vitally interested in making that relevant. And it hadn't been called sports psychology yet. That's how early a lot of that was going on. But anyway, later, when brain imaging technology improved, Cheryl was the first one who showed, using brain scans, that in general, men spend more time in their left parietal lobe, and and are more concentrated, and women tend to fire in more parts of their brain at different times. So, to overgeneralize that would be a mistake, because of course men do get distracted and move from one thing to the next and can do that. And women can. Not meant to be overgeneralized. But generally speaking, men tend to be less available to others, and women tend to be more available, but then also slightly more distracted. All right. So and this is where brain plasticity comes in. So one of the questions was, do you truly use only 10% of your brain? And the answer is flatly no, right? Because your brain does a lot of things, and every region of your brain is busy. It might be less busy with running certain subroutines, because when you're sleeping, it's doing one thing. And when you're awake, when you first wake up, it's doing something else. And then when you're in the middle of a task, it does a different thing. But so there's this shifting that goes on. And it's in the phasing from one thing to another. That's where the difficulty comes. And so, so there was another piece of research that came out and said that when men multitask, they lose 15 IQ points. But I don't even really like the word multitask anymore. But when men are distracted, they lose 15 IQ points. And when women are distracted, they lose 10. And so by virtue of being taking a smaller hit on their IQ, then the presumption is that makes for a superior experience. But it doesn't, because what is the message? The message is stay on one thing. Now, I'm gonna suppose that part of the reason why people don't like to read and will gravitate towards audiobooks is because of the initial discomfort of finding their book, sitting down, and the first few minutes of starting to read, and that it's a shift with their brain into a new thing. And there's also some new research that shows that when you're engaged in different kinds of tasks, your brain changes shape, function, and circulation. So, there's a certain part of your brain where you do a certain thing, and it's not necessarily the same for everybody, but you have these synapses, you have these connections that have already been made. Okay. And so then you're going to go sit and read. So then your brain starts aligning towards that, and then starts bringing the circulation, bring the blood flow to your brain into a particular place so that you can get that done. So I'm sure you can relate to this. You are completely engrossed in a project, and you're really into it, and your concentration's all there. And then somebody comes to speak to you, and then all of a sudden it's kind of like, huh? I mean, because you're not in your verbal center at that time. And, maybe someone came and got your attention, and you're like, okay, I missed what the first part of what you said was, because I was so concentrated on this. So hold on. Now I'm going to shift towards listening. And then, of course, that's going to require shifting away from the project. And then it might take a moment to get back into the project. So consider this for a moment. Do I put myself into situations of constant distraction? So I'm on Instagram, and, certain people I need to engage with. So I go to that one, and I'm like, oh, that is a picture I don't need to see. So I'm going to unfollow. Thank you very much. All right. And then I'm going to go there, and also I don't really need to see that. So I'm going to unfollow. And then, oh, there's a Joel Myers, right? So anytime Joel Myers posts something, I am going to watch it. And if it's particularly outstanding, which his stuff is generally is outstanding, then I'll go, another great job, Joel, or, I might take that and post it somewhere, post it on my Facebook, send it to my team. I'm like, hey, look at this, so, but then when I find myself sort of scrolling, I'm like, hey, wait a second. I'm going into that state of distraction. And this is something that is known about brain plasticity, is that it's aligned with habit. And so when you establish habits of, sitting quietly to read for 25 minutes, then your brain gets more accustomed to being able to do that and, get you through that. And then, if you're in the middle of reading and you realize that you're thinking about something else that you really do need to think about, you can stop, right? But because maybe that thing's way more important at that time. But if it's not, you could probably just write that down and go, okay, I'll take care of that later. Now back to reading. But so do we habitually train ourselves to be concentrated or to be distracted? And so if you tell yourself, oh, I'm multitasking and I multitask all the time and I'm really good at it and blah, blah, blah. Well, not really. And, you might want to try to be more concentrated on things. So, one thing that I've worked considerably on is the ability to really listen to people. And so, when I'm listening to somebody and maybe I'm not even enjoying what the line of conversation is, or I don't really see where it's headed, and I'm starting to think about other things, I'm like, no, hold on, wait, get all the way through this, because people want to be heard. And when we take the time to listen to them and respond and give a thoughtful answer because we heard everything that they said, then that's a way that we add value to that relationship. You can tell when somebody's sort of like losing patience with you or me when when we're talking, and they're ready to do something else, and then you're kind of like, okay, I'm not really getting anywhere here. So, and then what does that do? It makes you not really want, makes you kind of pare down anything you're going to say with them. There's less information can be shared that way. So, and as a application for coaching, one thing that I do frequently is I bring my players together and we all talk as one. And I'm very strict about one person talks at a time and everybody else listens. And if they're ever not listening to me, then I reinforce with them. I'm like, look, I listen to everything you say. Can you remember a time when I was ignoring you? Now, if you were trying to talk to me and I was busy talking to someone else, then I'm going to tell you, yes, I'm ignoring you right now. So don't interrupt another conversation. Don't interrupt me while I'm, completely engrossed in something that must be done right now. But I will tell you, let's talk about this later. So, and then, being able to really with excellence observe what's happening in a tennis match. It's really important to sit quietly and really watch that. So, and look at the little subtle things going on there. So, one thing that has helped me a lot in my career is being able to do on-court coaching in a live match at the high school level, because I'm watching my players very carefully. And so if they make a mistake and I can tell that they are, down about it or beating themselves up or whatnot, because I can see it in their body language, then I'm going to approach them on a changeover and I'm going to say, hey, look, let that go and move forward, and think about how you want to play. And also understanding the limitations of that, because my observation from the outside might be different than their experience of what they're seeing and feeling. So like, I think a great example of that is Pete Sampras, who whose body language was not the greatest, right? But when asked about it, he said, "Oh, no, I'm what you see on the outside is not what's happening on the inside." you know I have a very strong belief in myself, and a lot of confidence. But so it's important to then take that and communicate. All right. So here's what I want you to take away from this. Spend more time developing your ability to concentrate, especially through reading and listening to people. Listening to podcasts, okay, it's fine. But when you're listening to a podcast, I would recommend that you sit quietly and listen, and you're going to hear better. Driving is one thing. I don't know. I mean, for me, driving is kind of a mindless task. I don't really have to think too much about that, but I'm generally listening to music. And then on the other side of it, and then addressing the plasticity part, when you're going into something new, especially something that you're not comfortable with at first, give yourself some time to phase into that. It might take a couple of minutes. So when I first started writing books, I'd get my computer out and I would kind of like sit there, and then I would have to like force my fingers to go, here's one sentence. And now I pretty much go that, and I'm like on it. I mean, it's because I've been doing that for years now. So I've been writing, quite frequently, not quite every day, but writing quite frequently since 2014. Actually, wait a second. This is the 10-year anniversary this month of when I started writing books. What? I just came to that realization. All right. So give yourself some time, realize that your brain is going to shift, right? The early moments are always a little difficult. All right. Putting a time on it is really good, because then you're building up to it. You're like, okay, I am going to go live at 10 o'clock on Tuesday, every Tuesday. So at 9:35, I better start preparing. Right. And then here we are. And then the other thing is, look at, understand when you're distracted, when people are distracting you, and look at that distraction and go and evaluate it, because maybe you're off track. Maybe the thing that you're concentrating on is not what you need to be doing. For instance, I have this amazing propensity to get very interested in laundry when there's something else I really don't want to do. So think about that. Think about the weird thing that you do that's suddenly interesting because there's something you're avoiding. I'm like, oh man, if I'm doing laundry, I must really not want to do that other thing. And then, but look at those distractions, and then come to that realization. Okay, right now I'm distracted. It's fine. Right. I had a break in concentration. It can happen. Now, what am I going to do? I got to put that away. Right. Click that off. Close that app, whatever it takes. And so that you can get back to the concentration. And then that also comes into a match. I mean, look at the top players in the world and their ability to concentrate. And they're going to have one or two little breaks in concentration in a match that goes on for hours. But, our juniors are going to have a handful of breaks in concentration in an hour and a half. And our beginning players are going to have a break in concentration maybe every couple of minutes. So it's in that learning to concentrate that the brain plasticity improves, and then we can stay on task longer. We can shift into the task better. All of those things. So, man, I feel like I could go on forever on this topic, but if there's something that you liked, leave a comment. If you enjoyed this talk, then share and like and subscribe and all that fun stuff. All right. So I'll probably be on again live sometime between now and next Tuesday. But until next Tuesday, for Practical Neuroscience number 4, this is Bill with Practical Neuroscience number 3, Concentration, Plasticity, and Distraction.